Hello everyone, first news update for 3rd of March 2025. Now it's about 9 o'clock in the morning Moscow time, and I have bookmarked quite a number of news for today's update that Russian media reported about some major developments, and hopefully you will find this update informative and useful. Although before I start, let me inform you that later on today, most likely, I will publish second news update on my Patreon and Boosty pages, and also one more very important topic, which is that lately I notice high tensions among some members of our community in the comment sections on Telegram, on YouTube, and it is really unfortunate. And if I may, I will ask you to be extremely respectful to fellow members of community. We don't have to agree or disagree on all topics. That's the beauty of freedom of speech, isn't it? And expressions. Many of you probably disagree with many things that I say, but you still here, isn't it? Because I guess you want to know what kind of takes a Russian citizen journalist has, because if one person thinks that way, most likely many other people in that society thinks the same way. And this is a universal approach, isn't it? So therefore, I want to ask to be respectful towards each other, even if we don't like what fellow members are saying about certain developments. Situation in this world is deteriorating, and therefore, I can understand that emotions time to time may go wilder. I myself not turn immune to that, and I always apologize whenever I go emotional and start using some inappropriate language while commenting on politicians or political developments or geopolitical, whatever. But I'm always respectful towards our fellow citizens, ordinary people, societies. We are all in one boat, isn't it? We are all in the same boat, no matter where we live. In Russia, in US, in Europe, in EU member states, in China, India, or South Africa, we ordinary people are in the same boat, and we cannot allow these so-called elites to divide us, right? And to start treating each other as a hostile. It's not good for us, first of all, for people. So yes, please, let's be friendly. I was always proud, and I'm still proud that our community is a very friendly community, and let's keep it that way, if it's possible. Okay, that's been said, let's go. And dear friends, I don't want to start deleting comments. If you checked last 100 comments, for example, that I deleted, all 100 of them, literally all of them, were spam. There are many times that I disagree with the comment, but I'm not deleting it, right? So let's be more patient towards each other. This is the way to go forward, I think. So okay, that's been said. Let's go through some news now. And first of all, I give you update that Russian armed forces liberated settlement of Vysyola in the DPR, and dear friends, this is also a strategical settlement at this point on the line of contact, because if you take a look at the map, on the western side, from Vysyola to border of the Dnipropetrovsk region, there is just fields, no settlement, no nothing. Couple of kilometers, and that's it. Dnipropetrovsk region is beginning, and as I said yesterday, Russian troops are closing in to that part of their so-called Ukraine, and very soon, in short time, 3 to 5 weeks, I guess max, and the Russian troops will begin liberating people and their settlements in the Dnipropetrovsk region, also from that Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky. Now let's go through some other news, and well, there is a wild storm in the world, isn't it, due to actions of the US President Donald Trump and his administration. Yesterday, as it was announced earlier, and I spoke about it in yesterday's update, Trump rolled out sweeping new tariffs on entire world, by the way, almost entire world. So US President Donald Trump announced a sweeping new round of tariffs on Wednesday as a part of what he has branded as a Liberation Day plan, raising concerns about the potential global trade war. Washington is introducing customs duties on all countries based on the principle of retaliatory strikes. Trump has announced calling it a day of economic independence for the United States. The president confirmed that the 25% global tariffs on cars and trucks will take effect as scheduled on Thursday, so today, while duties on imported automotive parts are set to take effect in May 3rd. In his speech at the White House Rose Garden, Trump complained that none of, and this is quote, none of our companies are allowed to go into other countries. That's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariffs on all foreign-made automobiles. He declared that Trump's claimed their reciprocal, am I pronouncing it correctly, reciprocal tariffs would usher in a golden age for the country, adding that jobs and factories will come roaring back. According to a chart presented by Trump during his speech, the new tariffs will range from 10%, this is baseline tariffs on all countries, by the way, 10%. So tariffs range from 10 to 50% depending on the country. Washington will impose 20% tariff on EU, 34% tariff on China, although there was another 20 or 25% tariff on China, isn't it, already imposed, and this is in addition to that. So therefore China will be tariffed over 50%. 24% duties are on Japan, for example, and as I said, all the countries worldwide were tariffed at least this baseline 10%. UK, for example, was tariffed 10% baseline. EU was smashed with the 20% tariffs, which is quite a lot, and it might force many companies on EU territory to either shut down or to move their manufacturing plants into US, and I guess this is the deal in regards to this Trump's initiative. I said quite a number of times before that, as far as I understand, forces that are behind Trump and his administration are focused on reindustrialization of the US, and as we all can see, a way to go ahead with this program that they choose is to basically reindustrialize US on expense of mainly allies of that country, EU, for example, right? And the EU is suffering big time. This 20% tariff is gonna hit their leading economies in Europe extremely painfully. Germany, that is experiencing deindustrialization already, probably will face further acceleration of this process. Same can be said about France and many others, Italy, Spain. So it's a big deal. It's definitely a big deal. I read this morning some articles on the matter, and one of them said that in next 10 years, due to these new tariffs, US might receive about $2.5 trillion, which is a lot, isn't it? Which is a lot of money. Although I don't think this will fundamentally change situation for US. And I think this is not the main target. for US administration. They want to reindustrialize the country, and they want companies from worldwide, especially from their allies of the US, because it is the case that most advanced economies in this world are the allies of the US, with a few exceptions. I mean, Russia is not an ally of US, China is not an ally of US, but many others are, right? And among developed economies, and this reindustrialization process will be achieved on expense of these countries, right? So that's why I think this is the main goal, and additional revenues for the US in years to come is just a bonus on top of their industrialization. And one should always keep in mind, dear friends, that 2.5 trillion in 10 years might sound huge, and it is huge volume of money for majority of their countries in this world, vast majority, right? But when it comes to US, situation is a little different, because just to service current debt, US is spending about $1 trillion every year. Every single year, US is spending around $1 trillion just to service their debt that country is in, right? So if you take that in account, then these 2.5 trillion in 10 years potential revenues due to this new tariffs, did not really sound that much, right? And also one should keep in mind that every single year US spends on Pentagon and other federal institutions that are directly or indirectly connected with their defense and the security, also over $1 trillion, which is a huge sum, isn't it? Which is a huge sum. And even though DOGE, that is led by Musk now, is trying to cut government spendings, federal spendings in US, at least for now, we did not hear anything about significant cuts when it comes to Pentagon or these other institutions that are connected with the defense or the security, right? So therefore, I think main issue with US, and I'm not an economical expert, dear friends, I'm not a financial expert, I'm just sharing my take on the situation. I think as long as US continues run its economy as it is right now, I don't think any tariffs or anything at all will help country to overcome the obstacles that it's facing. If anything is need to be done in US, as far as I'm concerned, is to basically reorganize economy, because United States are too dependent on military industrial complex, which is too powerful, and basically while corrupting system and corrupting politicians, manages to receive hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars actually, year on year terms from the federal government, and this is just too bad. US don't has that much money. It's a major economy in this world, we all know that. It's a lucrative market for any business in this world, but still income that US has is not enough to finance all this absolutely unnecessary spending that Washington is engaged in. First of all, in terms of this $1 trillion spendings on year terms on Pentagon and all the other institutions that are connected with defense and security. No one is attacking US, right? No one asks US to be world police, but due to corrupt system there, due to constant demands from military industrial complex for more money, US is forced basically to be engaged in wars worldwide and to be, act as a, to be in a role of world policeman, right? To somehow justify these enormous spendings that it cannot afford. And after all, one should also keep in mind that every single year, in addition to what I already said, US is borrowing trillion and more every single year. And I think this year, 2025, is not going to be any different, despite all the attempts of DOGE to cut the spendings. I guess this year, US will also borrow another trillion and potentially more. So therefore, it is a big deal, this tariff war that US is initiating, and it will harm for sure economies of the many countries worldwide, and some would benefit US, but in a big picture, this decision would not change much, as long as US economy is still on the tracks of being extremely militarized. What US needs is a demilitarization of its economy. That's it. It's a simple stuff, by the way. You don't have to be genius to understand that. And when we're talking about US military industrial complex, it's not just these big names that we all are familiar with, like Boeing, Lockheed Martin. I mean, decades ago, we were familiar with McDonnell Douglas, Pratt and Whitney, General Electric, General Dynamics, and plenty others, right? There are number of companies that are, world famous. Some of them are no longer exist, but names still around. It's not just these companies. It's tens of thousands of companies in US that are rely on defense spending of the federal government, right? Because they are creating some parts for different weapon systems, or they are providing some services for militaries and security institutions, and it's costly. It's just too costly, right? So as long as the US economy is not demilitarized, nothing will help it. It's that simple, in my personal opinion, yet again. And I'm not an economist, by the way, so take my viewpoint with a mountain of salt, but that's how I see the situation. A number of countries already made statements, including China, that they will retaliate on this new phase of tariff wars that US is engaged in right now. And we might find out towards the end of this year or the next year that as a result of this decision of White House, world economies growth dropped significantly, because that's what is going to happen. Overall, this decision will have negative impact on the world economy, although it might benefit little bit US without resolving fundamental issues that economy is facing there. So yes, big deal, obviously, big deal. Entire world is talking about this topic, and this might be just the beginning of these tariff wars, by the way. This might be just the beginning. I see one plus in all of this, surprisingly, which is that globalists are upset big time. And whenever globalists are upset big time, it should be beneficial for all of us, right? Because I see globalists as a main threat for this world, right? Western ruling class and the globalists as a fundamental threat for humanity. So if they are upset, and they are, by the way, that's a good thing. Sort of bonus on top of this cake. Also, Vzglyad newspaper is reporting that, and dear friends, some people noticed that when yesterday Trump was talking to journalists in the White House, this Rose Garden, he pulled off this shit, isn't it, with countries and the procents that these countries will be tariffed and stuff. And there was no Russia. There was not just one sheet, a number of them, and there is no Russia in this list. And there are some so-called journalists from so-called media outlets in the West complained why there is no Russia there and not Belarus mentioned. And not Witkov, but Treasury Secretary of US was asked about it by Fox News, a journalist, and he said that there is no trade with Russia and Belarus, almost non-existent, right? And therefore, it does not make no sense for US to tariff non-existing trader like 50, 100 or 200%. Baseline tariffs are there for all countries. So therefore, if anything being exported in US, like uranium, titanium, and that kind of stuff, probably those goods either will be tariffed 10% or maybe not, because in certain circumstances, exceptions will be possible, especially when topic is about some goods that are necessary for US strategical security, and of course goods that Russia is exporting, like titanium details for Saturn planes, uranium for nuclear power plants, and so on. It is a topics of strategical interests of US. So maybe they will not impose even this 10% on main part of Russian export to US, but some goods will be tariffed, by the way, right? But yet again, the US never was a huge trade partner with Russia, so therefore we would not even notice that, really. Anyways, maybe Russia was not mentioned in that sheet that Trump was showing to the public. But we have this report, for example, from Vzglyad newspaper, that Kat Kellogg, special envoy of US president, proposed blocking Russian oil tankers in the Baltics with the icebreakers. Why icebreakers, by the way, in the Baltics? I don't know. So new sanctions from the US could affect Russia's frozen assets and the transportation of its oil, including the use of icebreakers to block ships. US presidential envoy Kat Kellogg said maybe he confused the Baltics. I mean, some ports on Baltics are frozen during the winter time, but it's not like in Arctic, by the way. It's a little ice that can be navigated without deploying huge icebreakers. Maybe Kellogg confused the Baltics with the Northern Sea route, and if so, then that's an even bigger issue that this idea of blocking Russian vessels in the Baltics. In any case, we are observing preparations on part of US to escalate with Russia big time, because yesterday I reported about discussions in the U.S. administration about closing Baltic Sea for Russian vessels and vessels of other countries that are entering Russian ports. And Kat Kellogg actually confirmed this report, and he went as far as to say that yes, they are considering to block Russian vessels and also to act on frozen Russian assets. On the Fox News, Kellogg noted that their new anti-Russian sanctions being considered by the US could be aimed to Russia's frozen sovereign assets and attempts to stop their transportation of Russian oil. Kellogg says there are $300 billion US dollars in frozen assets of Russia, a fleet that carries much of their world oil. He says 70% of that oil is shipped through the Baltics, and that movement can be stopped. Kellogg suggested using US Coast Guard icebreakers to block their movement of ships carrying Russian oil, calling such a measure extreme. At the same time, he emphasized that US President Donald Trump is focused on achieving a ceasefire in the conflict in Ukraine. He expressed hope for a comprehensive 30-day ceasefire that would cover air, sea and land. So there will be no ceasefire, by the way. Russia is not gonna play these stupid games of the White House or the collective West. Russia has its own point of view, and the Russian leadership was very clear. I mean, Russia wants this conflict to end forever, and to achieve this, we don't need temporary measures. 30-day ceasefire? Are you kidding me? What 30 days? Why not 35 or 38? Why not 44 or 55? Why 30? I mean, what is this? It's just nonsensical stuff, right? And even then, who gonna monitor this ceasefire? Kiev regime on daily basis is breaking this energy ceasefire. And what? Did US even one time reacted on that? When there is overwhelming evidences, right? Overwhelming evidences that Kiev regime is breaching this energy ceasefire while targeting Russian energy facilities literally on daily basis. And did anybody in US administration even once address this issue? No. And they are talking about 30-day unconditional ceasefire so that they will be able to reorganize their proxy, rearm, and then reignite their next phase of escalation. What the hell, man? It's nonsensical, of course, but yet again, there gonna be no 30-day ceasefires. By the way, it's obvious, right? Russia not gonna play these games. Although Russian politicians will be diplomatic and they will say, you know what, you want 30-day ceasefire? Okay, let's do 30-day ceasefire, but there is steps that need to be taken by your side, by collective West, to make sure that ceasefire works. That's what is going to be Russia's position. Moscow not gonna say we are not interested. Moscow will say, okay, let's do it, but there is conditions for that. And let's see how serious you are about ceasefire. And that's exactly what Moscow's position is currently in regards to this Black Sea initiative, and that's the approach that Moscow will deploy always whenever there will be talks on any sort of ceasefire. But most importantly in this news, Kellogg is talking about blocking the Baltic Sea for Russian vessels. He is mistaken. He clearly has no idea volumes of Russian oil sales and from which direction this oil being exported. And also he has no idea about Russian economy, because clearly not just Kat Kellogg, but many others in the US leadership, US political class, or the Western so-called elites are thinking still, by the way, that all Russia does is exports oil and gas, and that's the only ways Russia has any revenues at all, which is far, far away from being true. Of course, energy sector plays huge role in Russian exports, but it's not just energy, by the way. We are talking about Russia, biggest and richest country in this world when it comes to natural resources. So it's not just oil and gas, it's many other goods, also services, by the way, and it's not just rare materials. It's also products, right? Concrete, products, quite often high-tech products. So this attitude of the West that all Russia does is exports gas and oil, and if we stop this, then we can influence Russia. I mean, this is just too outdated, by the way. I mean, I know U.S. leadership was thinking that way like decades ago, or the Western leadership, but come on, now they should know better, right? Russia is one of the biggest bread baskets of this world. An agricultural sector in Russia is huge, right? Russia is exporting food worldwide. Russia is exporting some high-tech equipment worldwide, including nuclear power plants, by the way. And when I say high tech, I mean high tech on a level that very few countries in this world are capable of reaching. And Russia is one of the biggest when it comes to this nuclear energy, right? Civilian nuclear energy. Nothing to be said about other goods that are in between, right? And they still think that they're gonna block oil and Russia gonna collapse. And these people are on high positions, isn't it? On decision making, in many cases, in decision making positions. People that have such a mistaken understanding of their modern Russia. But if they try, by the way, if they try to block Russian fleet into Baltics, I mean, this might trigger World War III. You know, yesterday I spoke about this, and I said that if I was asked, I would struggle to give you an answer. What would Russia do in case of blockage of the Russian vessels in the Baltics? But same time, I understand very well that Kaliningrad, by the way, has no direct land border with Russia, right? Kaliningrad region. I mean, let me show you on the map difference. And if US and other NATO member states will go ahead with blocking the Baltics, I mean, this is Kaliningrad region, which is bordering on one side with Poland and on another side with Lithuania. And what would Russia do? What do you think if Kaliningrad is blocked and Russia is unable to reach this territory? Of course, Moscow cannot tolerate a blockage of Russian Navy, right? And yet again, such crazy ideas, if are realized or attempted to be implemented, may easily trigger Third World War. And people on high-ranking positions should be careful what they are talking about or what they are hoping for, because they may not be ready for consequences, right? We are living in crazy times, dear friends, that's for sure. And when it comes to frozen Russian assets, I don't think anybody here in Russia expects that these frozen assets will ever be returned to Russia one way or another, today, tomorrow, after a year. But Western ruling class is gonna steal these assets, right? They are stealing profits from these assets already, and they're gonna steal these frozen assets too. I think that is going to be the case. So therefore, if Kellogg or anybody in the White House think that while talking about these 300 billion frozen assets, they're gonna intimidate Russia, I mean, they're so wrong, by the way. We just don't give a damn, right? We just don't freaking give a damn. It was a mistake on our part to have investments in collective West countries. We learned the lessons. I guess the Russian economical bloc did not think that Western ruling class will go that far in its degradation. And that's why this 300 billion was invested in the West, right? But they did. And now we know, and the entire world knows, that if you are not stupid, you have to stay away from Western economies. You just have to, because they might take your investments at any time like that, and that's it. They would not even explain you anything. We all know that now, isn't it? And unfortunately, this lesson was extremely costly, 300 billion plus, because yet again, profits from those assets already been stolen, billions, by the way, in profits. And yes, lessons learned, what we can do about it. But if they think they have some leverage over Russia while mentioning these frozen assets day in, day out, well, they don't. They simply don't. RIA Novosti is also reporting that it's not just threats, by the way, of additional sanctions on Russia. Trump's administration already imposing more and more sanctions on Russia. And for example, we have this report from RIA Novosti that United States has imposed sanctions against 6 individuals and the legal entities from Russia, according to a list published by the US Treasury Department In particular, it includes Russians Yuri Belwakov, Vyacheslav Vidanov, and Sohrab Gairat, who also has Afghan citizenship. Among the companies subject to restrictions are Edison LLC, Calibri Group, and Skyframe. I never heard about these companies, about these people, but I guess U.S. Treasury Secretary or the Treasury had some knowledge about them. It is specified that listed individuals are organizations were included in their SDGT sanctions list as a part of fight against terrorism. Really? Wow, I mean, come on now. Designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. Freaking idiots, man. Freaking idiots, man. And you want us to take seriously these psychopaths that are in leadership of US? I mean, anybody really expects that we will take seriously these psychopaths? We will just laugh at these bitches, man. Right? And by the way, recently Vladimir Putin stated that there are 28,595 sanctions imposed on Russia. For that moment was 28,595. Now it's significantly more, but I guess there was some error in Russian media, because at one point media was reporting about 40,000 sanctions. So I guess because Putin recently spoke about 28,595, that's the real number, plus minus some couple of thousand more, right? Because I don't know when exactly Putin said this. So since then, probably there was additional sanctions, because there's almost every other day West is coming up with such a crazy stuff. But still, by the way, I mean, 28,000 sanctions, it's quite a lot, isn't it? Russia is the most sanctioned country in this world by far, right? And of course, these additional sanctions, I mean, no one would care about it, including these people that being sanctioned or their companies, right? But it's sad. It's sad to see total degeneracy on part of leadership of the Western countries. I mean, they are morons, by the way, literally morons, uneducated morons, and they might have 10 diplomas from Yale, Harvard, Oxford, or whatever, but they are stupid as hell. And that's why Collective S is doing this badly, by the way, for decades now. For decades and decades, there is a constant decline in the West. Am I correct, dear friends? I mean, members of our community from Western countries can tell us. They think quality of life or situation in our economy or in the social fabric is getting better in the last 20, 30, 40 years, or worse. I think it's much worse than it was in 70s and 80s in US or in the Western Europe. And not surprisingly so, because yet again, when countries are run by morons, total morons, puppets of the globalists or whomever is pulling the strings, then what else do you expect? I mean, only decline, right? TASS news agency, meanwhile, is reporting that Russian foreign ministry is open for realistic peace initiatives for Ukrainian settlement. As I said, man, Russian side will be, calm, cool, diplomatic, because I guess lesson was learned also in regards to strong statements, right? There is no need to make strong statements if you are not planning to follow through them. If your warnings being ignored, it is better to use extremely diplomatic language, and just if necessary, just mess around your enemies, just demonstrate time after time after time how stupid they are, and you can do it with a polite diplomatic language, like this, for example, that Russian foreign ministry is open for realistic peace initiatives for Ukrainian settlements. And by saying so, Russian foreign ministry is saying that these are stupid, these people in the West, right? in the leadership of West. They are coming up with some unrealistic, nonsensical ideas. But if somehow miracle happens and their brain will start working in heads of some of the people that are in charge in the West, and they will say something truly positive, realistic, then we are ready to discuss. We are ready to talk. But before that, or until that, we are listening. Okay, you go ahead with your nonsense. We will listen. I mean, we can do that. Or we will pretend that listening, most likely. That's the attitude. Moscow is open for realistic peace initiatives for Ukrainian settlement and their mediation proposals that take into account Russian interests. This was stated in a statement by the Russian Foreign Ministry following a meeting between Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Galuzin and the Assistant Foreign Minister of China Liu Bin. Russian side emphasized that in order to achieve a comprehensive, fair and lasting peace settlement, it is necessary to unconditionally eliminate the root causes of the conflict, including dismantling their threats to the Russian security emanating from the territory of Ukraine as a result of NATO expansion to the east, as well as stopping Kiev's extermination of the rights of the Russian-speaking population. Moscow's openness to realistic peace initiatives and mediation proposals that take into account Russian interests was declared, and it is true many times, by different level of officials, including President. In this context, the activities of the Group of Friends of Peace in Ukraine, created at the UN platform, were discussed. The ministry said their high demands of interaction between Russia and China with their countries of Central Asia have been noted. The Russian diplomatic mission added. At Smolensk Square, where foreign ministry is located, they noted that their meeting took place in a friendly and trusting atmosphere, meeting between Russian and Chinese diplomats. And as you know, dear friends, Chinese foreign minister was here day before yesterday, maybe yesterday also, and there was high-level talks between Russian foreign minister, Chinese foreign minister, and Russian president. And their sides exchange their opinions about bilateral relationships, world affairs, and of course, behind the closed doors, they discuss most likely how countries gonna cooperate to tackle basically all the provocations that collective West or Western ruling class is generating on the world stage. Kommersant newspaper, meanwhile, is reporting that well, Dmitriev, by the way, head of a Russian direct investment fund, Kirill Dmitriev, and the special representative of the US President Steve Witkoff had their talks in Washington, according to reports of the media outlets. No details are known. What sides discuss, what was the point of this visit, and what might be results of it. Probably nothing, my personal opinion. But anyways, Russia is not just talking the talk, but also walking the walk. That's how this say goes, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but and so yes, Dmitriev, as a representative of Russian president, went to US. This was, I guess, Russian counter gesture on a recent visit of Witkoff to Russia. I guess that's how business goes between the countries. You send your representative, then other country sends its representative. Okay, so Dmitriev went to Washington, had a conversation with Witkoff. He, as far as I understand, he was not greeted, not by Trump. He did not had a meeting with Trump, which is not good, because Witkoff was greeted by Putin himself. He he find the time to have a talk with the representative of Trump, and Trump should do the same. But he lacks political culture. Obviously, he lacks culture in general. This uncultural moron, and therefore no surprises. But if someone adequate was in leadership of US, probably that someone would act exactly the same way as Russia did. So if Russian president received your special envoy, you should do the same, and allocate at least half an hour or hour for conversation with the representative of Russian president. But yet again, when we are talking about collective West now and their so-called elites there, I mean, these are total morons, by the way. So what should you expect from them? Isn't it? Just a constant demonstration of how stupid they are and despicable. RIA Novosti is also reporting that Financial Times find out what the Western coalition is discussing in Ukraine. Okay, Financial Times, let's go through this news. The coalition of the Western countries is discussing the use of NATO structures to deploy forces in Ukraine. Financial Times report, citing unnamed officials familiar with the plans. NATO command and control structures would be used to deploy so-called assurance force to Ukraine under the proposal being discussed in talks led by France and UK, the publication said. According to the newspaper, the forces will also be able to use their joint intelligence and surveillance capabilities of the North Atlantic Alliance. The proposal is just one of several options being discussed and could change before final agreement is reached. Official told the Financial Times, and well, why am I not surprised? Of course they're gonna use NATO infrastructure because they are NATO freaking troops, right? These European so-called militaries are NATO militaries, and of course they're gonna use NATO infrastructure for deployment, for logistics, for intelligence, for everything, right? And quite understandably so, Russia was, is, and will be against appearance of NATO troops in Ukraine, at least official deployment of these NATO troops, because that will mean, as Russian leadership said quite a number of times, direct involvement, open direct involvement of these countries into hostilities against Russia, and Moscow will have no option but to take all the necessary measures to neutralize these additional threats, which means that these troops, many, if not all of them, then many, most likely, many of their NATO troops that will be deployed into Ukraine will go back to their home countries in the body bags. That's what it is. And if European citizens don't want their fellow citizens to arrive in their country in the body bags, they should go out of streets and protest craziness of the policies of their governments. Because once these body bags start arriving, it's going to be too late, right? And soon Russian missiles might arrive also in those countries. And I don't think people in NATO member states that will be directly engaged with in this hostility really want that or dreamed about. So it's up to them, really. They brag about democracy and freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff, isn't it? That people are deciding policies of their governments and people not being ignored. This is a mantra in the West, isn't it? So let those people in the West influence their own politicians until it's not too late. If those people even understand what the hell is going on, man. But we do. Our community is well informed, so we understand that next phase of escalation is imminent. And unfortunately, Western ruling class will go ahead with their not just deployment of NATO troops into Ukraine to provoke wider war, but most likely Western ruling class will go ahead also with their second scenario of next phase of escalation, which is going to be transformation of this Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky into a nuclear-armed terrorist regime. And I'm afraid, as I said many times before, until through the escalation, which is eventually happened also, of course, but until this true de-escalation will take place, we will face at least one, potentially couple of phases of extreme levels of escalation, because the Western ruling class not yet ready to acknowledge defeat. They are just not ready for that, right? And you can see it in their rhetoric, in their acting, in their policies, and they are going to go ahead with their next phase of escalation for sure, which is unfortunate, by the way, because that means more casualties, more destruction. But yet again, Russia actually can do nothing in this regard to avoid this escalation, because it's not Russia that escalates, it's a collective Western ruling class that constantly escalates, isn't it? And when it comes to defending ourselves, Russia will of course do whatever is necessary to protect its sovereignty, its national interests, its people, whatever is necessary. That's it. RIA Novosti reported, dear friends, that unfortunately yesterday Russian strategic bomber Tu-22M3 crashed in Irkutsk region during their flight. And unfortunately, even though crew managed to eject from the bomber, one crew member during the descent did not make it. Parachute, there was a low altitude, as far as I understand from reports that I see. There was a low altitude, and parachute did not had enough time to be deployed. So one pilot died as a result of this crash. Three others survived. There is 4 crew members in Tu-22M3 bombers. So 3 survived. One unfortunately did not make it. And come on, this update is already 52 minutes. I did not expect that. I was hoping to see 30 minutes there. Wow, time is flying, isn't it? So, okay, dear friends, then I will end this update on that. I had quite a number of news left, but I will talk about those news and some more additional reports that Russian media will share during the day in my second update today. At evening, probably it will be walk and talk type of video. I will go out and I will record their update from Moscow, from streets of Moscow. Many members of our community on Patreon, Boosty, do like this walk and talk videos. So hopefully they will find it informative and interesting. And yes, this is it, dear friends. I am really surprised that this update is this long. I did not expect that. Wow. Anyways, hopefully you will find this episode of news update informative, interesting, useful. And if so, please click that like button, leave some commentary just about anything. This is the only way, as you know, we have to influence the algorithm in a positive way to reach wider audience. And if you can share information about my channel with your friends or share the video. And if you like my work, if you like my channel and want to support, you can do it through several means. Through PayPal platform or Boosty platform to donate. You can also donate through cryptocurrencies, and you can subscribe to my Patreon page or page on Boosty, where I have quite a lot of extra content on a regular basis. Yesterday, for example, on Patreon and Boosty, I published third episode of Random Stuff, and I see many members of our community did find this new program, Random Stuff, interesting. And I will make sure that to make more content and the more interesting ones. And in coming days, dear friends, I will publish next episode of the Heritage program. It's in the works. All the video is done, and now it's montage is left, montage of video, sound, and hopefully before end of this week I'll be able to publish that. So let's see. Anyways, all the links are on this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. Have a wonderful day and take care. Bye for now.